start with assumptions that the authors hold that you noticed in the book, or things you wrote down on your paper there. So, do you have a volunteer to start?
I wrote, the authors assume that children construct for themselves strategies that model the action or relationships in a problem. Also, there is an assumption that children do not have to be taught how to count on.
Okay. One of the things that the authors hold near and dear to their hearts is the notion that kids come to us already with an intuitive sense of mathematics, and it's our job to figure out where they are and to build on from where they are, and that in a way it's like get out of their way, because they really have sense making, and that should always be at the heart of what we do with kids. They all, consequently, when they wrote this book, this is edition 2. The first edition did not have the extra 2 chapters that are in this book. And the 2 extra chapters in this book address more of the nuts and bolts as far as teaching goes. They didn't have it in edition 1 because they believe so firmly that kids come to us knowing things, and we shouldn't prescribe to them how to do math, that they didn't want to put that on teachers and say, here's a recipe to follow, do these things. And they believe that very firmly. So you need to make it work with your group of kids, with your style. And so it's not like, okay, here's what you do week 1, here's what you do week 2, and so forth. It really is based on your kids, what they need, and how you can best support them. So that's an assumption that they believe, that I picked up on that. Others?
I found that in 6th grade, not all students have been successful in the earlier years, and so they'll come to me and they've already established that mindset of I can't do it, and especially in 6th grade. And so I know some of this is geared towards the younger learners.
Can't hear you, what?
That this is geared towards younger learners, it seems like, and that's fine because I do have some students that are at that level still with the math. But I feel like the author's assuming that they're coming to me with that mindset that they have a strategy somewhere in there, but there's so much in the way of I can't do it, you know what I mean? Then you have to get through that stuff.
And I fault the math education that they have had to date, because it may not have been grounded in their own sense making, and so consequently we keep layering on top of them things that don't really make sense to them, and they do oftentimes by early elementary turn off to math.
Yeah.
It's not for me. I don't have what it takes to understand this. Causes math anxiety, math trauma, so on and so forth, and then it affects people for the rest of their lives. Because I mean, I don't know how many parties I've been at where someone at the party says, "Oh, well, I wasn't any good at math," or I had parents sitting across a table from me at a conference and say that in front of their child. "Well, I was never any good at math." And I was like, well, you would never say that about reading. So why is it socially acceptable to say that about math? And so to your point that yes, this is, especially these first beginning chapters are geared to the young child, but it sort of flips as we go through the book, because later on in the book it's more multiplication, division, place value, and so if you'll hang in there, you two, around this early elementary, you guys hang in there when we get to the other part that, it does flip for later on in the book. Okay.
I have assumptions that would piggyback to that, is that where it said that all teachers who understand how children think about math are well equipped to teach for understanding. And they come in with their prior knowledge, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're right on board for you to begin where you should be.
Well, that's true, and I was just reading a blog today from someplace, Corwin or something, anyway, it was about misconceptions in math and how we need to first, they use some clever way of describing it, like you first need to get rid of throw out the old misconception in order to change over to understanding for them. And so, we do have to uncover what they know and don't know, so that we can build from there. And if we have some misunderstandings or some misconceptions, then we need to be able to undo that, at the same time supporting them to understand the new things. So I'm doing the talking here. What else?
I just noted that they talked a lot about that gradual release responsibility, and just thinking about that and when to know those nuances of that direct modeling, then that we do, and a lot of it being placed on the students for that. You do, yeah. So
Yeah, instead of I do, we do, you do model, it's really you do, then we do, and then maybe if I need to support you, I'll support you. I mean, not maybe, but I will support you. But it's not, the direct instruction piece really happens from the kids learning through the debrief of the problem solving, and that's where their learning gets advanced.
And I get really challenged, sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Like, for example, when we do DMRs, we do daily math reviews in 6th grade in the morning at Central. I don't know if people do them elsewhere, but I have a group of
that's a Central
students
thing.
that need a lot of support. Otherwise, they will sit there and nothing will get done. So I pull them up in the morning, and we kind of, like, all school year, we've been working through the same types of problems. But if I don't do direct instruction with them, like step 1, it won't get done. Like, I don't know what else to do besides direct instruction, because it's one of those things where I say, well, what would make sense to do here, and there's, I don't know. That's what I get. So I mean, I have to get something out of them, so I go to direct instruction.
And I think, unfortunately, we have perpetuated that whole notion for those students that if I wait out the teacher will tell me what to do here. Even in 2nd grade, I was in a 2nd grade class, and it was like, well, do I add or subtract? I mean, we no sooner got done reading the problem than, do I add or subtract? They were waiting for the teacher to say, this is how, okay, you're going to add in this situation, or you're going to subtract in this situation. And what CGI is saying is, when they make sense of the problem for themselves, then they have an entry point into the problem. And I know 6th grade's a different, if they've got 7 years now of somebody telling them what to do, that's a hard thing to undo.
Yeah, and if they say I don't know long enough, then
Yeah,
it's like,
and what do? You're gonna let them sit there and
for an
twiddle their
hour.
thumb for a whole math block?
And they will.
yeah, I know. They know.
And they know that, so.
Well, I think it's kind of the opposite with kindergarten. I mean, to do direct instruction would be like, oh my goodness, because, I mean, they all come in at different places, and so when I have them in small groups, I can just do that instruction to the ones where they need it.
Other assumptions? Maybe one more, and then we'll move to something you agree with, and something you want to argue with, and something you want to aspire to.
I think that the whole practicing something in an erroneous way, what I've learned before is, to stop that, so I have that impulse to and so to let them just continue, I did some CGI today with my students, and there was a little boy who had some chips, and the problem was a frog jumped down 6 steps, and then he jumped down 2 more, and I have the mats that you gave me, and they have 10 frames, and then they have a number line and a divider, and he put out, I watched him, and he's a pretty capable learner, which is why I called him up to put his, I drew one on the board. So he, and we've been practicing writing equations and stuff, and so he filled in 8, 6 first, and then the 8. And then he wrote the equation, and it was totally different, and I was like, interesting, and the kids were, I disagree behind him, and then I was like, oh, geez, what do I do now?
Well, Joe Bowler is a Stanford math professor who does a lot of work with math for students and teachers and parents. Anyway, she has a book called Mathematical Mindsets, and in the book she has research to say that kids learn more from an incorrect answer than they do from a correct one. Their brains are creating new dendrites. So hopefully during the debrief when someone was disagreeing with this person's
So they came
math,
up and they did the different, how they had written the equation. And then, you've modeled that for me. Would you like to change, allow your brain to grow and change your mind? And then,
did he change his
Yeah,
mind?
yeah.
See? So that's good.
But I don't know, I don't know. I just have a hard time, like, for someone to be so vulnerable, right, to come up and then have that, it's uncomfortable for me, But he, it didn't stop him.
They usually just
Right, let it
just
roll
take,
off.
Yeah, take it in stride, and it's also a classroom culture
Yeah.
thing too. Once your classroom culture is established, that we talk about math and we honor mistakes and we allow ourselves to revise our thinking. Once you get that established in the room, it's like, I need to revise my thinking, and so it goes. But and I think we do. Probably every one of us sitting in the room have had that experience somewhere in our career, elementary math career as students, where we maybe didn't feel like that. We were sitting in a classroom culture that mistakes were honored, and maybe we didn't like having to go up to the board to do our, the problem in front of the whole class. And so some of that is our own
Projection.
Yeah. We're feeling, oh gosh, I remember what this felt like. Oh, I don't want this for my kids, there's a lot of math trauma in our world, and a lot of math anxiety comes up every time this is my job, right? But every time I go to the math fellows meeting and I'm sitting with high school math teachers and we have to do math and every time I just go, oh God, I don't want to. And it's just, I think it's just a piece of us. Maybe these kids who are growing up now will not feel that, but I think it's really common for us. Any other things that you agree with from the book? And it's probably maybe for some of us it's maybe some other things, some of the same things that we've already mentioned.
Allowing students to use strategies that make sense to them, even if they don't make sense to me. If they're getting the answer right, it's kind of like, sweet, I don't know how you did it, but.
It's not the way the book said to do it, but you got the right answer, and if it makes sense, and it works every time.
Yeah.
I mean, because sometimes they luck into a correct answer when it won't work every time. But yeah, that can put us in an uncomfortable spot, because I don't know what you did here. I don't know how I can support you. So much of math is the way we have traditionally taught math. It's a performance experience. We expect kids to perform and perform accurately. When kids are learning to read, we expect them to make mistakes, right? And it's not that same, oh, you got the wrong answer here, you said the wrong word. I mean, we just sort of expect that they're not going to be perfect at it. And yet with math, it's so much, they've got to get to the right answer. Or, it's a different experience to do math with allowing wrong answers, and even it's taken me a lot of work with Anita Langus, who comes up from the U, to me personally to not feel that drive that I've got to get every person in the class to get the answer before we can debrief. Because again, it's like they might have the wrong answer, but it's okay because their brains will grow more from that cognitive dissonance and that disequilibrium that we present to them when, oh, that's not I didn't get the same answer and I wonder why. So, something to keep in mind. Other things you agree with?
I agree with having other students' strategies or thinking being made visible to the other students so that they can have access to other kinds of thinking. Because I've had that happen to me where I was like, oh, never even thought about that, you know?
Right?
Yeah.
And you go, oh, well, I'm going to remember that the next time I'm presented with a problem like that. I'm going to remember what that student did because it may be more efficient. It may be more sense-making at the heart of it. A lot of reasons for kids that they'll take up somebody else's strategy. And sometimes they'll even say, well, I'm going to use Adrian's strategy, or I tried Colleen's strategy, and so they will learn from one another as much as they will, if not more, from what you've shown. Okay, first do this, now do that, then finally do that.
Well, to piggyback off of that, that's one of the big things, I think, is just that there's multiple strategies to get to an answer, and that's been a big aha for me in observing CGI happening in classrooms. And it's just been really freeing coming from some trauma in math all through grade levels. It's been wonderful to see that and to see how we are really opening eyes for students and allowing them to have that growth mindset. So, yeah.
And that's, for me, I've seen CGI in action for a couple years now, and what I see with the students is they feel empowered.
Yes.
They feel like they're mathematically confident. They can do whatever is presented to them, and they're willing to take that risk and be that growth-minded.
They see it as a puzzle. I mean, it's like it's a challenge that's
Good
fun.
challenge.
Instead of looking at it and being like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to answer that. They're
Yeah,
like,
or what's
okay,
the formula? Or do I add or subtract here?
Yeah.
I don't see that. I see kids just go, oh, and away they go. I have a photo that I could show you of a little boy and a little girl in a first grade classroom, and she had a misconception. And the picture is of the little boy, and he's like leaned over with her, and he's showing her where her error was in her thinking, and it's just adorable. But that happens naturally in the classroom when kids believe that at the heart of mathematics is sense making. I can make sense of this. I can help my neighbor over here who may not be making sense of it completely. I think she was subtracting, but she was like counting up, but she was counting 6 plus 4 more, and she'd say 6, 7, 8. Yeah, and so he was very gently showing her how she, where the error of her ways was, and it was so cute. But that sense-making piece is so, I agree with that. And I also agree with the trajectory that kids go through. They directly model the situation, and then they'll move into a counting strategy, and then they'll move into a derived fact, and then they get to recall. And traditionally, the way we've taught math is we've circumvented that process. We've gone from allowing them to use manipulatives and directly modeling things to recall. And so that bridge between being concretely modeling it and then having to recall basic facts, if you will, then there's that piece that's missing for them. And that's why you still have kids in high school who, when they're faced with 7 plus 8, have to go, they missed that derived fact, that counting strategy, that derived fact. They were expected to go right to recall. And so I believe very strongly in that trajectory. I've seen it. And it's not once you start using a counting strategy, you'll never go back to direct modeling. It's a fluid kind of situation, even based on a different problem type. They may go back to needing to directly model. And we need to honor that with kids, so.
So are they, I might have missed it in the reading, but they're saying that students will naturally go from direct modeling to more, like all students will move naturally at their own pace?
Right, at their own pace, and that's the piece that gets tricky because,
Because we're saying in third grade you have to know your,
yeah, when you may have some kids who still need
yeah.
to, there's a lot more power in using derived facts
Mhm.
with, so I don't know what 3 times 9 is, well, that's a bad one, let's say, I don't know 8 times 7,
Yeah.
but I know 5 times 7 and 3 times 7, and I can add those together. That derived fact is a lot more, there's a lot more power in that,
Mm-hmm.
a flexible way of getting it to it than I just need to memorize 7 times 8 is 56.
Do we need to use those terms with kids, derived facts? I just call it a trick. Like, oh, you know that trick. But is this trick like probably not appropriate either?
Trick's not appropriate, no, because the subtle message there is
True.
that
Magic.
it's magic. Some kids can do magic and others can't, but
Strategy
we
maybe?
it's a like the same thing do you guys in 2nd grade call it decomposing the numbers? So it's really you're decomposing the number, one of the factors. Then if that's a common language piece,
Well, just not necessarily that, but I'm talking about like teaching multiplying times 20. You're multiplying times 2, and then you're annexing the 0. And so, but that's a strategy kind of.
it's a
overreaches it.
strategy. There's a whole book, or not a book, it's a booklet that is available called Nix the Tricks, and it's all those shortcuts that we teach kids that really don't. The sense-making piece may not be there for them, and one of those is the annexing the 0. If it makes sense to them, by all means, use that language.
Oh, right. Okay.
But if it's well, the teacher told me all I have to do is multiply by 2 and put a 0 on the end. I don't know why I do that, but I just, if the sense making is not there, then that's not
Yeah, I do
where we
explain
want, so,
why we make sense out of it.
yeah. Something else you agree with, or should we move to argue?
Well, for the argue, I would have to jump on that, because we had this in our math lab, we talked about it, where all the teachers were using different terms with the 2nd graders. He recommends not using the problem type names with the kids, and I disagree. I always do, and I use the exact regrouping, I use the exact math term when I work with the 2nd graders. So I they make up names sometimes like the hop the bunny, and that's the number line. I know we're using the number line.
Right.
So I don't use all the fun names.
There's the problem types that they're describing are the ones that, these problem types this is from Common Core. So they don't need to know what a join result unknown is, or a part whole unknown, or a separate start unknown. Those are when they're saying they don't need to know those names, that's what they're referring to.
But like when he has compare the difference unknown, but I say that to him. This is
Right, and that's,
okay, because I'll say
using
this
those
is
words
using the unknown.
in language is different than saying, boys and girls, today we're going to learn how to
Yes.
do a separate result unknown problem. And you need to know what a separate result unknown problem
yeah.
is. I have trouble. I've read this book probably 6 times, and it's probably been just this past year that those terms are sticking in my head. So imagine if a kid had to memorize all these change unknowns and start unknowns and all those things.
But like the strategy description, I thought those were good. Like I'm going to try to make myself, joining all, joining to, separating from, separating to, matching, trial and error. So that's my goal, is to try to, when I say joining to, they're gonna know exactly what that means. And they'll be able to do that.
you don't need to teach it to them.
Right, in that
You know,
term.
you could have an anchor chart that says,
this is.
Daniel's strategy, and underneath maybe put joining to or whatever, but, the strategy and their ability to understand the strategy is more important than whatever label we might stick on it.
So does that
Yes,
work for multiplication properties too?
Yeah,
So we don't have to teach like the property of, I don't even, like. I'm
well, the
drawing a blank
properties, like the
now.
commutative property,
Yeah.
distributive property,
But
those
those are
are-
strategies too, aren't they? I mean, or
yeah, the understanding and the names of those strategies, there's no harm in